So I'm in this Reliance legal entity. So as I told you, parameters are those short controls that we have that guide the entire process. So what all the configuration that we have done until now are one side, and the configurations, yes or no options, or the different selections we have in the accounts payable parameters are on the other side. So these control parameters guide and control the process activities. Either something has to be stopped or to be handled in a different way. So we'll see what all there in the accounts payable parameters. So for that you have to go to accounts payable. Parameters are always under setup. We have the first option as accounts payable parameters. We've been to this page multiple times already. So we have something under general, like one-time vendor account. You can, as I told you earlier, you can create a one-time vendor in the business. And whenever you are doing trade with such kind of one-time vendors, you can use that vendor account. You can use create a vendor name as one-time vendor account and use that vendor for the miscellaneous vendor activities. Sometimes you don't have regular vendors in trade. If you don't have such kind of regular vendors, and I mean, if for all those non-regular vendors, you when with whom you do trade only once in a while, so you can create one-time vendor account, and for all such kinds of vendors, you can use that vendor account rather than creating those vendor records as multiple vendors in business. You can use that one-time vendor account. So you can give the system that one-time vendor account here, or indicate the system that this is the one-time vendor account that I'm going to use or that I have created. Then tax exempt number requirement. It's not mandatory that you have to assign tax exempt number, but if I give this as mandatory, like domestic plus EU member states or EU member states, if I say if it is EU member states, for all the European vendors that you would create or the vendors that created with the European address, the tax exempt number is mandatory. You have a field in the vendor master as tax exempt number, which has to be assigned mandatorily. If I say domestic plus EU member states means it covers all the vendors, may it be the local as well as the EU member. EU means European Union member states. So all of them would require tax exempt number. Whenever you create a vendor record, you should definitely assign a tax exempt number. That's what the requirement is if you give this option. If not, if you say none means it's not required for vendors. You don't have to assign any tax exempt number, and trade can be done without that also. But if you enable this one or give some of the other option, then you have to have a tax exempt number, and without having that, the vendor account will not be valid, or you cannot proceed with the trade, or system triggers an error message saying that exempt number is missing on the vendor master details. That's all. Can also give a mandatory tax group means, so up to now, assignment of the sales tax group on the vendors or a default sales tax group on the vendors is a it's not a mandatory field, or it's a optional field that you can either add some such sales tax group there or you can leave it. We did not added anything to any vendor because sales tax module is not configured yet in our system. So if at all you say this is a mandatory tax group means whenever you create any vendor record, you should definitely assign one or the other sales tax group to the vendor, or in the vendor master you have to assign a default sales tax group. So if not, you cannot save the vendor record. So it will become a compulsory field or a mandatory field if this is enabled. But most of the in certain European countries, they feel like they should definitely have the tax group assigned for the vendor so that every time they do trade with the vendor, tax calculation is done compulsorily. Without that also, you can assign at the invoice level, the tax groups can be assigned. But what if user forgets? You would have an issue that tax will not be calculated and invoices will be posted. And again, you might have to take corrective measures by reversing the invoices or posting credit notes and then posting the correct invoices again. So that's a trouble. So you can mandate a tax group on vendor records so that whenever a vendor record is created, a tax group can be assigned to the vendor. And this option, which we have seen earlier, post product receipt in ledger, If we enable this parameter, then only a product receipt entry will be posted to general ledger, or the accrual entry during the creation of product receipt is posted to general ledger. If not enable this parameter, it will not create the voucher during the time of product receipt, and it will not post into general ledger. Most of them will prefer to have a product receipt voucher, but some people will not use product receipt voucher. They don't want to post any financial accrual entry during the receipt of goods. Only the original entry will be posted at the invoice level. So what happens at the invoice level is you don't have the reversal of accrual entry or reversal of product receipt entry also. It will be a simple invoice entry. So you can also ignore it if you want to. If the client doesn't require the financial transaction to be posted at the product receipt level when they receive the goods, so you can ignore the process, but most of them would prefer to have those entries in place, and you can enable this parameter if they require. And relating to the invoice, so we have certain details for the invoice. Actually, default settlement type for credit notes. So this means that it will automatically settle the credit note. So select the standard settlement type used when you create a credit note in the purchase order page. So when you create a credit note in the purchase order page, you can normally settle it with the open vendor invoice, or if the invoice is not open and it is already settled with the payment, you can settle the credit note with the refund amount that you received from the vendor. So here you have the option none open transactions or designated transactions. If you say none, means credit note will not be settled with anything initially when you post it, but later you can go and manually settle it with any other transaction if you want to. Otherwise, if you select open transactions, means credit note will get settled to any of the open invoices. If there are any open invoices, automatically credit note will get settled to those open invoices or one of those open invoices. Designated transactions means only to specific transactions. I mean, suppose if you are creating a credit note for a purchase order or an invoice, automatically it would get settled to that particular invoice only if it is open. Or, or you can say most of them would prefer to have none, because once created a credit note, they can go to the vendor transactions, look into the open transactions, and then they go for settlement of the transactions. Then here, check invoice number used. Means if at all one of the invoice number is used, do you want the system to select the same invoice number for another invoice if they are posting another invoice on a later date? So how system have to handle such duplicate invoice numbers in accounts payable is guided through this one. So do you want system to reject the duplicate? Do you want system to reject the duplicate within fiscal year? Means in this year it will reject the duplicate. Next year if there is the same number for the invoice, it will accept, saying that the fiscal year is closed already or fiscal year is completed, so it will accept in the other fiscal year. Accept duplicates means it will accept the duplicates regardless of any fiscal year. So today if you post an invoice with a number, tomorrow if you post the invoice with the same number, it will accept. It will accept the duplicate. But accepting the duplicates would create some kind of data issues. So you should not have same multiple invoices on the same number, right? It is not good practice or not generally happens, but if sometimes if it is required, you can enable the parameter accept duplicates. Warning in case of duplicates means it will just provide you the warning that the invoice number that you have entered was already posted. It's a kind of duplicate number. Do you still want to post it? It will give you a warning. It will not stop you from posting, but it will give you a warning saying that it is a duplicate number. However, this one reject duplicate means it will not allow you to post the invoice if it is a duplicate, if we are using the same invoice number once again. So the most of them would prefer to maintain different invoice numbers. Mostly vendors will give different invoice numbers only. They don't give same invoice number all the time. So everybody have their unique number sequence, right, for invoicing process also. So accordingly they'll follow. But in case if user is going to commit a mistake by entering the same invoice number for a different invoice, then system will regulate the user not to post the invoice with a duplicate invoice number, or I mean kind of same invoice number. Then tax exempt number requirement. Again, you see this field. Earlier you see this field here, tax exempt number requirement, and here you see this field once again. In the general menu, this tax exempt number requirement field is for the vendor level. When you create vendor records, the exempt number is mandatory. In the in the invoice menu, it is for whenever you are creating any invoices, tax exempt number is mandatory on the invoice. It's not mandatory to maintain on the vendor record, but when you create any invoice, so the tax exempt number is mandatory that you can keep here. So for which countries or which vendors it is mandatory. So if you say none means it's not mandatory, exempt numbers are not required. And you can have other selection as well here. Then you have one more, required document date on vendor invoice. So select the system response if document date is not specified on a vendor invoice. Document date cannot be after the posting date, or none, no warning error message or error message will be displayed. So you have three types. You have one option called as document date or invoice date option in the while you are doing an invoice or posting an invoice. So if you don't fill that document date, generally system will pick the posting date as document date. I told you. If you select this option as none means it won't stop you. It will select automatically the posting date as invoice date. But if you select the option as warning, it will give you a warning that document date or the invoice date is missing on the invoice. Please fill the invoice date. So that is mandatory. That I mean, it will not. It is not mandatory. It will give you a warning, but still you can post it. But if you give error means if you do not fill the invoice date, system will automatically stop the user from posting the invoice. It will not consider the posting date as invoice date, but it will give an error message saying that document date is mandatory. Please fill the document date or the invoice date. That's all. So we just keep it as none. If they want it, they can use it as the others. I mean, anyway, error or warning. Next, we have credit note as correction. So generally, credit note as correction is an option where we have. So when we post a credit note, suppose we have negative numbers, right? I mean, in the quantity we have negative numbers. When it comes to the, let's say, let me scroll it down and explain you the entry. Normally for normal product receipt, the entry is like purchases is credited. Inventory received is debited. Normally for normal purchase orders. But for a credit note, when you post a product receipt for credit note, inventory received is credited since you are sending the inventory from your company to the vendor or returning the inventory. So inventory received will be credited and accrued purchases will be debited. Normally when you post a credit note product receipt, right? So let's say suppose this is for 1000 and this is for 1000. But when you use this one credit note as correction means, so it will not debit and credit these accounts. It will as it is keep the same accounts. Accrued purchases will be credited only and it will be debited only, but with negative numbers. Minus 1000 credit, minus 1000 debit. Since negative numbers are not considered as real numbers in accounting, so most of them will not prefer to use negative numbers in the vouchers. Okay. There will be a proper debit and proper credit, but a minus 1000 credit and a minus 1000 debit is kind of invalid in many countries in the process of accounting. But if you use credit note as correction option here, entry will be posted like this. It will post the same kind of entry like invoice. I mean, in normal normal purchase order product receipt for the credit note also, but with a negative number, minus 1000 and minus 1000 here. So debit and credit will be the same, it will not alter, but entirely the numbers will be in minus figures, which will also give the same effect of accounting in the trial balance. It will reduce the balances. Neither you credit the account, or if you credit the account with a minus balance, either you debit the account or credit the account with a minus balance, it is the same impact, right? So the closing balance will be the same at the end. So that's what happens when you use credit note as correction. Then check for W9 form. So we have a W9 form field in the vendor master. Actually, this is specific for US vendors. If there is only W9 form, then only you can do trade with the progress trade with the vendors. If you have this check for W9 form enabled. So if you disable this check for W9 form, it's not required. I mean, W9 form is not required for the vendors. But if you keep this as a mandate, so it has to be filled at the vendor master level in case if you are creating any vendors. So that's up. Invoice payment groups. So you can group the invoices for the payment actually. So select this option to let users add invoices to payment groups. So you can create payment groups and add some of the invoices to payment groups. So what happens is user can group invoices by a common code so that if one invoice in the payment group is settled, the other invoices in the group are included in the same settlement. You cannot clear this option if any invoices are added to the payment group. You first must settle the invoices that are added to the payment group or remove the payment group code from the invoices. So it is saying that you can create a payment group, you can create a unique code under which you can group some set of invoices. And if you are making a payment for invoices, you have to make payment for the entire group of invoices that you have grouped. And it is also saying that if at all you have any invoices under a group or a payment group, you cannot disable this option again. You have to remove all the invoices from that group, or you have to settle all the invoices in that group, and then only you can disable the option. Otherwise, you cannot disable it. That's what it is saying. If at all you are enabling and using it, this payment groups option, it's not required since you mostly they don't fall in business like grouping the invoices and all. Then use vendor accounting using the invoice date. Update vendor accounting using the invoice date. Normally, vendor accounting is not updated according to the invoice date. It is updated according to the posting date. Whenever you post any transaction like invoice or a payment, so according to the posting date only, vendor accounting is normally mentioned or is accounted in the ERP, like in Dynamics. But if you want the vendor accounting to be done according to the invoice date, so whenever any invoices are posted, posting date is not considered for accounting and invoice date is considered. So if this parameter is enabled, and then post charge account in ledger, select this option to post the charge account in ledger. Anyway, this is not required since for charges we have our own main accounts given, right, for each charge code. So according to that, it will post the debits and credits to those areas that we have configured in the charge codes. Then display invoice totals in on pending vendor invoices list. So we have a form called as pending vendor invoices. We have seen it already. So in that case, if we have many pending vendor invoices, so when you enable this option, um, it will also show the amounts of the pending vendor invoice in the header level. So without opening the invoice only, you have list of invoices it will show, right? So in that only it will show you the amount of invoice also. If you enable this parameter, invoice totals will be displayed. It is saying that it is sometimes it will be slow when I enable this one. So it is giving me this option. Selecting this option may lead to slower performance when saving vendor invoices. If you want it, you can select OK. If not, you can disable it. You can open the invoice and you can see the total. Without opening the invoice, if you want to see the total at the header level only, or I mean in the form level, then you can enable this parameter. That's one. So you can also create invoice groups actually. If you enable this option, you select this option to let users add vendor invoices to invoice groups. You cannot clear this option if any invoices are currently part of the invoice group. have to first post those invoices or remove the invoices group code. Actually, you can group some pending vendor invoices into an invoice group, and you can post all the invoices at a time. So if you are posting one invoice, all the invoices in that group will be posted to it all automatically. If you don't want to post any invoice, you can remove it from the group. So you can use this option of invoice groups so that you can post multiple invoices or group a set of invoices to be posted at a certain time. So there is such option, but not most of them will use these payment groups and invoice groups. So they would go for, I mean, straight invoicing of single invoices rather than grouping them. Then invoice validation menu, we have seen this already yesterday in the previous class. So we have seen invoice validation, how it is done, um, different types of validations, as well as invoice totals matching, quantity matching, charges matching, how it will work and how the tolerances work. So that controls are there in here in the invoice validation page. Okay. Other than this, we have ledger and sales tax, which is a key page. So ledger and sales tax normally indicates what kind of, I mean, ledger accounts related to the operations that are done on the accounts payable module. So how the ledger accounts are picked will be mentioned in the ledger and sales tax. Suppose if you see here, you have given a posting profile as general, means whenever you are performing any transactions with the vendor, behind the vendor account, you have the accounts payable account in the general posting profile that you have created. So system will consider that main account from here only. I mean, if you and give the posting profile here, assign the posting profile here, then system will consider the accounts payable account behind the vendors. If it is not provided here, you cannot post any transactions. It says that posting profile is missing. It's a mandatory configuration. Okay, and the primary receipt posting, primary discount posting, these main accounts are related to the product receipt posting and discounts on any trade discounts. Trade discounts are not accounted actually. Any other discounts will be selected from the item. So at the if you select item means at the item level you might have definitely given an item group in which you have configured the different accounts for different situations. Maybe for product receipt posting or invoice posting or any other inventory movement alterations, you have given some accounts in the item group. So accordingly, from the item, the accounts will be picked. The accounts payable account will be picked from here, and the other related accounts related to the item for the construction of vouchers like product receipt or invoice will be picked from the item level, from the item group that is linked to the item. Other than this, you also have other selection like vendor, but for receipt posting, you cannot select vendor. If you select vendor also, you have to manually give an account maybe, but you don't, everybody will select item only, and this is the mandatory field actually. There is nothing to change in this place. So my accounts are automatically picked from the item group if you give this option as item. Then promissory notes, so mostly used in Spain, not in other countries. In case if you are using any promissory notes, you can give this promissory notes posting profile for promissory notes. Or you can create one more posting profile for promissory notes. Most of them will create in Spain. Then remit promissory notes, you can create one more posting profile. For invoice remittance using the promissory notes, you can give one posting profile. You can use the normally same posting profile in case if you create one for the promissory notes. It's not required anyway. Then payment. So in case if you are making any prepayments, prepayment journal, not prepayment invoice, it's a normal advance payments we have seen already, where you have the option of making the journal as a prepayment journal. So automatically when you click on that option prepayment journal, this prepayment posting profile will be considered in the payment journal. So that is picked from here. If you don't give it here, it is not picked there. And then you have this one, sales tax on prepayment, sales tax on prepayment in prepayment journal. So if you enable this option, you should have mandatory sales tax calculation on the payment journal also, on the prepayment journal. If you're making any advance payments, you also need to have some sales tax payments in that advance payment to the vendor. if you enable this option. It is a mandatory tax calculation if you enable this, but not most of them would prefer to add the sales taxes and the advance payment. So you can disable this option if the selection is like that or if requirement is like that. Then warn if payment proposal uses multiple methods of payment. This means select this option to receive a warning when payment proposal returns more than one method of payments on the same journal line. So suppose if you are running a payment proposal, yesterday we have seen how to run a payment proposal. So if you are using different methods of payments for each different invoice line, so it will give you a warning message that there are different methods of payments. If you are using same method of payment, no error message. And if you disable this one, it's not required at all. I mean, there won't be any error message. You can make any payments with different methods of payments. That's all. Then for prepayment invoicing process. So posting profile for prepayment vendor invoice. So it is also a mandatory setup. You have to definitely set up this one if you want to process the prepayment invoice under purchase order. So this profile will be considered for prepayment invoicing process and prepayment application policy. Do you want the prepayment invoice to be applied automatically to the original invoice, or do you want a notification that prepayment is pending on this original invoice and you can apply it? So you can select your policy. You can select notification so that you will get a notification when you are creating a original invoice, and you can link the or you can apply the prepayment to that original invoice so that that amount will be reversed in the invoice line automatically. That's all. Then cash flow forecast. In case if you are using any cash flow forecast, you can give the terms of payments here. So time between delivery date and invoice date. What is the usual time between the delivery date and invoice date? Do you have any idea? If you give, can give like once the goods are received, it will take 5 days for me to invoice it. Sometimes invoices are delayed, but average is 5 days, like I can say. What is the default terms of payment or the average terms of payment? I can say net 30 days is my average terms of payment. For every invoice that I invoice, I'll pay within 30 days. So time between invoice due date and payment date. You can say like another net 2 days or something like that. Or net 5 days, saying that I will take another 5 days of grace period from the due date to the payment date. So normally it would be delayed like 5 days. You can say liquidity account for payments. You can select the cash account or the bank account for payments. Liquidity percentage of amount to allocate to cash flow forecast. You can create one if you want to. So what happens is when you give this is it will automatically calculate the cash flow forecast, how the movement of funds or how much requirement of funds is there and how much amount is there in the liquidity account, and are we able to meet this month's cash flows of on the accounts payable side if you have to pay the vendors or not. So that will be evaluated according to the dates, I mean the terms and the account that you give here. And you have sales tax calculation. So we have a process called as invoice register and approval. So where sales tax is accounted during the invoice register process or approval general process, that's what it is asking. It is only for the people who use the register and approval process. We'll see it someday if we have time, register and approval process, but not most of them will follow that process. And sales tax is normally calculated at the invoice level only. Whenever you are posting any invoice, then only sales tax will be accounted. In Dynamics, I mean, if it is a sales tax, yes, it is accounted at the invoice level. If it is a withholding tax, we have the option either to account it at the invoice level or at the payment level. So for Indian accounting, we have that option, but in US, I think we don't have one. Then credit rating. So for vendors, whenever you create a vendor record, you have the option of credit limit. So you can give a credit limit to the vendor. Suppose if I say I gave 1 lakh credit limit to the vendor, and if I keep this parameter as none, means that credit limit that I gave to the vendor will not be applicable. So it will still just show up, but it will not stop you if you at all you are exceeding the credit limit, because you kept the parameter as none here. You can keep the parameter as balance plus packing slip plus product receipt, balance plus all. So you can keep something like balance, so that whenever the vendor balance is exceeding 1 lakh, or if the vendor balance is already 1 lakh, and if you are going to post one more document, then it will throw an error message saying that you are exceeding the credit limit. So you can try this example normally. You can keep the vendor credit limit as 1 lakh and use this option credit limit type as balance. If the vendor credit limit is exceeding 1 lakh, it will stop you from posting the invoice saying that, or it will also stop you from posting the product receipt also, saying that the credit limit balance is being exceeded. So that parameters of credit control for the vendors is given here. So if you keep none, it won't select any. But if you also have the option of balance plus packing slip or product receipt, not packing slip, actually balance plus product receipt. So it will it will sum up the vendor balance, already the pending balance of the vendor plus the product receipt, and combinedly it will calculate. If that amount is exceeding the credit limit, then it will stop you. Or balance plus all means balance plus product receipt amount plus charges plus sales tax plus anything that you have to pay to the vendor on the particular purchase order that you have created recently. Everything will be summed up, and it will throw an error message saying that the total of the amount is exceeding. I mean, the already existing vendor balance plus the new purchase order amount combinedly is exceeding the credit limit. So you cannot proceed with the new order now. And if you make any order less than up to the credit limit of the vendor within the 1 lakh, then you can proceed. Then you can proceed with the processing of the order. Settlement. So this is specifically for the automatic settlements. Normally, when you make any invoice and a payment, they don't get settled automatically. You have to manually settle them. You have to manually settle the invoice to the payment. We have seen that process. And during the time of payment also, you can settle the invoices, but we have to manually select them by clicking on settle transactions page. But we also have an option called as automatic settlement, where invoices are settled with the payments automatically. So you have this option of automatic settlement here. Open invoices. Select this option to automatically settle open invoices when a payment or credit note is updated. So when you create any payment or credit note, automatically the open invoices are settled with them if you enable this option. And in case if that automatic settlement is enabled, how the cash discount has to be accounted. So there can be chances that some invoices might be having cash discount. So some of them will not be having cash discount, and that might be expiring. If you as a you as a business man, what you will do is you will settle the invoices that you have the cash discount expiring initially, so that you can avail some cash discount. But how system can know that the only that invoice can be settled, and how system will manage such kind of cash discounts when the automatic settlements are done? So that will be handled by this one. So unspecific or specific, two methods we have. You can go through this narration once. It also gives you some examples, and it will give you a brief understanding about how cash discount is handled when automatic settlement is considered. And you have maximum penny difference. So this is when you are settling a set of invoices or a large number of invoices to a single payment. If there are any penny differences, so how much penny difference that you can allow the system to? So I can say one up to $1 I can allow, so that $1 is adjusted to that penny difference accounts, and the voucher will be posted properly. And if it is exceeding $1, the penny difference amount, it will not post any transaction. It will throw error message saying that it is exceeding the maximum penny difference amount that you have given here. In case if a single payment that you create is going to be automatically settled with the open vendor invoices or set of open vendor invoices, then, and if there is any penny differences situation, this particular penny difference or maximum penny difference amount is considered from here. So maximum overpayment or underpayment. Sometimes overpayment and underpayment is also considered when system when automatically payment is settled with the invoices, if at all you are using automatic settlement process. So that how the overpayment and underpayment have to be handled and what should be the maximum overpayment and underpayment that can be done is given here. So if the overpayment is exceeding or underpayment or overpayment is exceeding $1, then system will not allow you to settle the or will not automatically settle the payment transactions to the invoice transactions. So that's one situation. Then calculate cash discounts for partial payments. So this one is disabled. Calculate cash discounts for partial payments. This is what this parameter is for a situation where suppose if I say invoice amount is 1000 and there is a cash discount of 10%. Let's say suppose cash discount of 10% on this invoice amount, which should be availed in 10 days. Okay. So if at all I pay the total thousand, I mean if at all I'm ready to pay the amount in 10 days, I can only pay 900 to the vendor, and the 1000 is considered as 100 is considered as the discount. So 10% of 1000 is 100 only, right? So 100 cash discount I can avail. But here what I'm doing is I'm paying only 500 in the suppose on the fifth day, and within the 10 days on the fifth day I'm paying 500 rupees or $500 suppose. In this situation, cash discount is not available or cash discount cannot be availed because you are only paying the invoice partially. You are not totally paying the invoice amount. You are paying only $500. So cash discount will not be calculated. But if you pay the remaining amount, like within the 10 days only, if you are paying another $400, suppose let's say, then you can get 100 cash discount in this. So 500 plus 400 is $900 you are paying, and 100 will be accounted under cash discount. So if this partial payment, if you do does it on the fifth day, you don't get any discount for this 500. Only when you make a complete payment or make the remaining amount also pay the remaining amount also within the 10 days time period, then only you will get the cash discount, and then only Dynamics will account the cash discount. But what happens if you enable this option is calculate cash discount for partial payments. If you make the partial payments also, then discounts will be calculated. Suppose if you are making 400 payment, something like not 400, suppose if you make a 450 payment, so 50 will be accounted as a cash discount. For the partial payments also cash discount will be accounted. For the remaining 450, if you are paying within the 10 days again, another 450. So then at the time again another $50 of discount can be availed. So partial discount can be availed at the partial payments of the invoice. If at all you enable this parameter, calculate cash discount for partial payments. If you don't enable this, then cash discount is accounted only when the complete payment is made on the invoice. If there is a rupee pending on the invoice also, it will not allow you to avail the cash discount. So that's how. Then calculate cash discount for credit notes. In case if you are posting any credit notes, do you want to also calculate cash discounts on the credit notes? You can say yes, or you can say no also. If you say no means never a cash discount is calculated on a credit note. But there can be situations where you might have posted original invoices with cash discounts and you want to, as it is, reverse the invoices by creating a credit note. So in that situation, you have to calculate cash discounts on the credit note also. So that will be handled with this parameter. Then discount offset accounts. So how discount accounts are considered? Actually, for cash discounts, we know discount accounts are taken from the discount code. Use main account for vendor discounts or accounts on the invoice lines. Normally, accounts on the invoice lines means this one use main account for vendor discounts. So this account is considered from the accounts for automatic transactions. Let's say suppose you do not apply any cash discount code. You do not apply any cash discount code on the vendor at the vendor level. I mean, you did not assign or set up any default cash discount code for the vendor, and at the invoice level also you do not have any cash discount code, let's say suppose. And while making the payment, you can add some cash discount and make a payment. At that time, since you do not have a cash discount code in place, it will consider the main account from accounts from automatic transaction. There we have a account called as vendor cash discounts account. Actually, I'll show you that account. Most of the times when you use cash discount codes, accounts will be picked from the cash discount code, where there we have an option for main account of accounts, vendor cash discount and customer cash discount in the cash discount codes. But if at all you are not using cash discount codes and sometimes applying the cash discount directly, then the account will be picked from here in this place. Here we have the accounts for vendor incoming, vendor offset, vendor interest, vendor cash discount. This one can give an account here for the vendor cash discount, and the account will be picked from this place. So for any such kind of cash discount that you directly assign to the payments without using the cash discount codes at the invoice level or at the vendor level. So that's how. Then we have broker and royalty, which we are not covering anyway. So this brokerage and royalties are mostly used in certain service sectors in Middle East and Europe. But we are skipping this part of brokerage and royalty. This requires a big setup or almost like 10-step setup. Then we have number sequences, where you can identify unique number sequences for different situations, like for vendor account, for one-time supplier, for report number. And then for internal invoices, credit notes, product receipt voucher, original invoice voucher, product receipt confirmation voucher, credit note voucher, charges voucher, prepayment voucher. So for every vouchers as well as the master records, you can see the number sequences here, and you can also see the description for what they are related to. Unique key for vendor identification, something like that. So you will have you will have this description clearly given here for all of them. That's how you can, whenever you have any issue with any number sequence, and it will clearly give an error message saying that the issue is with the payment voucher or the issue is with the vendor account number voucher number sequence and all. You can come to that number sequence and troubleshoot the issue. So that will be there always under the accounts payable, parameters page in every module. Number sequences are there in the parameters page in every module. So that would cover the set of accounts payable parameters that we have. And tomorrow we'll start with the accounts receivable concepts. We'll start with the O2C cycle and then the other activities related to accounts receivable. Accounts receivable will be similar to accounts payable, only just it will have the customers and the customer side transactions where inventory will be moving out of the company or the sales transactions. But the process, the screens will be almost the same. So it would be little easy for you to understand and we can complete it quickly. So accounts payable, as I said, is a very important module. I want you to practice well so that it would be really helpful for you if you understand the various operations in accounts payable as well as the configurations.